Let's get started. Welcome to today's webinar on enhancing grant management with social value. A very special welcome as well to all the members of the local government association. My name is Maddie Kortenaar. You might have gotten an email from me, but I'm the marketing director of the Social Value Engine. And we offer a platform that makes it easier and more accurate to measure and evidence social value. A few things before we get started. First thing is please keep your camera off if you're not a speaker. That's just so we can video the right people. We are recording this webinar and it will be shared with everyone after the event, and people are free to forward it to others as well. And also at the end of this webinar, we will do a Q&A. If you have any questions, please just put them in chat, or you can use the Q&A function at the top of your screen. And we will try to answer them all in the last 15 minutes or so. So it's my honor to introduce today's speakers. From East Riding of Yorkshire Council, we have Andrea Turton. She's the local growth manager, growth program manager. We have Jennifer Jefferson. She's the program funding coordinator. And from the UK Shared Prosperity Fund and Rural Prosperity Fund, which is quite a mouthful for South and East Lincolnshire Council's partnership, we have Sol Farrell, who is the Senior Programme Manager, and Charlie Batty, who's the Senior Programme Officer. Sol and Charlie, over to you.
Brilliant. So I'm just going to share my screen now, so please let me know if you can see what's coming up on the screen.
Yeah, all good, so.
Yep. Lovely.
All good.
So as Maddie kindly said, I'm the Senior Programme Manager for the UK Shared Prosperity Fund and Rural Prosperity Fund across South and East Lincolnshire, and I'm joined today by my colleague Charlie. Charlie.
Good morning everybody. I'm Charlie Batty and I'm the Senior Programme Officer for the UK Shared Prosperity Fund and Rural Prosperity Fund in South and East Lincolnshire Partnership.
So we're going to cover a few things today. I'm just going to quickly run through a bit of background about the South and East Lincolnshire Council's partnership with 3 district councils who've come together to deliver services for residents over quite a large geographical area. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about our UK SPF and RPF programme and how we've approached it over our wide geographical area. And then I'm going to talk a little bit around social value, what it means to us and how we've built it into our programme. And we have a particular focus on employment and skills, as well as the support we've offered to people who are facing particular barriers to skills, housing and employment. And then finally, Charlie's going to take you through how we're approaching data, outcomes and evidence in relation to social investment, as well as the impact, the early impact that social investment has had in our local area. And again, I will emphasise that we are 1 year into our SPF programme. It is early on, but we are seeing some really interesting outcomes and some really interesting impacts on social value and social mobility in our local area. So rather comprehensive and quick whistle-stop tour of where we are and how we've got to where we are. Just very quickly, because I love doing this, because I'm a great fan of where we are in the world. I like to incorporate a few pictures of our local area in every presentation I give, and we of course have the beautiful Lincolnshire Wolds there, Tennyson Country, and we have our lovely Boston Stump there. So if anyone does want to visit our part of the world, there's plenty to see. So moving on to a bit of detail about our partnership, we are 3 separate and sovereign district councils: Boston, East Lindsey, South Holland. That means we are running 3 separate and sovereign UK SPF programmes, but governing them together in one central programme team, which is administratively quite tricky, but at the same time, it certainly offers a lot of diversity in terms of the programme. We have 120. Over 120, it's 122 elected members across our partnership area. So there are lots of politicians with a lot of interest in the programme and in social value and in the difference that we're making for local communities. We cover a vast area. We cover 1,112 square miles, serving over 300,000 residents. And you can see here on this this map, and apologies for the absolutely dreadful use of Microsoft Shape, but the geographical area we cover is vast. It stretches all the way from Peterborough here in the south, so just outside of Peterborough, right the way up to just outside Grimsby in the north. So we cover a long stretch of land, and indeed our geography, our area, is greater than Greater London. So it is a substantial area in which to deliver the programme. It includes most of the Lincolnshire Wolds area of outstanding natural beauty and what we call the heart of the UK food valley. We have a great substantial agricultural sector in our area, and just under half of all fresh produce eaten in the UK is actually produced in the district of South Holland, so in one of our districts in the south. Remarkable. And we of course have strengths in the visitor economy, Skegness, the East Coast, and also the Wolds as well. So in terms of our UK SPF programme, we have been allocated £12.15 million in UK shared prosperity funding and rural prosperity funding across our 3 councils. UK SPF, of course, replaces the previous European Social Fund and the European Regional Development Fund. So it is the post-Brexit funding arrangement for local regeneration, was one of them. And it focuses on 3 themes: communities in place, supporting local business, and people and skills. We knew that this was coming in late 2022, and I believe Ivan's on the call, who was marshalling a lot of the extensive public consultation that we undertook. And we wanted to undertake that extensive public consultation because we really wanted to find out what our over 300,000 residents and our local stakeholders felt that our area specifically needed. And we wanted to do something that was tailored to the unique sectoral mix and also the unique character of a lot of our communities. And when we came to it, actually, that was the approach we took in terms of the distribution of the fund. We were a bit brave and said to communities, let's come to us with your ideas. We opened the entire fund in communities in place and supporting local business up to open grants. We launched it pretty soon after the government gave us the go-ahead. We launched it in January. I came on board alongside our interim programme team in March 2023. And Charlie joined us alongside our permanent programme team a wee bit later in July 2023. So we're a relatively new team in the council, and we've been able to mobilise the project quite quickly. But I often liken it to building the car as we drive, because we didn't have a huge amount of time. The guidance that DLUC has given us for the delivery of this, it is a little loose. It's intentionally loose to enable local areas to have the flexibility they need to deliver. And so therefore we found ourselves implementing guidance, implementing the structure of delivery at a very quick pace. And the consequence of that is that we've had to opt for almost building our evaluation and our means of quantifying social value at a very quick pace as well. And Charlie will be going into a little more detail as to how we did that without the social value engine and how we did that manually. Programme has been wildly successful in terms of popularity. We were vastly oversubscribed. We received 220 applications for funding to the main programme, 65 of which were successful. Now that 220 number doesn't count the applications we've received to what we call our delegated schemes, where projects are dispersing grant funding on our behalf. If you include those applications into the mix, you start to get to a figure of somewhere between 500 and 600 applications for funding processed through the system. It's an absolutely vast number of grant applications that we've had to look at, and so therefore we've had to apply the principles of social value, and we've had to do that at quite a large scale in our area. And that brings me on nicely to the question of, well, what does social value mean to us in South and East Lincolnshire? And in a nutshell, really, to us, it's all about ensuring that the benefits investment ensure the well-being of current and future generations. That's environmental benefit, economic benefit, and social benefit. And we often see in economic development there's an emphasis on return on investment, the financial return, the additional investment that public sector intervention is going to generate within the local economy, and the consequent uplift in GVA. And I'm not talking down the importance of GVA uplift. return on investment. For every pound invested, we still have a target of realising £2 in leverage additional investment for our SBF programme. However, social value, to me, gives the most holistic view of the impact this investment can have, because it's the things that communities notice. They notice, for example, that their village hall is in much better condition than it was previously. They notice that their environment is cleaner. They notice that they can access rural services. And so we have taken social value as being really the framework that we've used in terms of our assessment and appraisal of grants, and we've also taken it as a core framework for our assessment of impact, which Charlie's going to talk about a wee bit later. In our area, however, there are a couple of real complex dimensions that we've had to tackle in terms of realising social value. I mean, we are a very rural area, and rural access to services, particularly in the absolutely stunning Lincolnshire Wolds, really quite tricky in terms of access to health, in terms of access to adult skills. We have an ageing population. We have one of the older demographics, particularly in East Lindsey district around the coast. And we also have a real problem in retaining young people and their talents. I mean, I grew up just over the border in West Lindsey, and I remember, of the 140 young people I was at school, I think only about between 5 and 10 came back into the local area in any substantive respect. We do see a great outflow of our young people and of young talent to the cities, and we want to encourage these people back into our area because we have a great standard of living and cost of living is lower. We have a resilient, growing local economy, but we do have real challenges in our area with in-work productivity. Boston and East Lindsey, the level of in-work productivity is only 3/4 of the national average. We have high levels of economic inactivity, and that indeed is linked with the ageing demographic that we have in some of our areas, but it's also linked with entrenched problems around health and around in-work activity. So it's around sort of barriers to work. And we have a real challenge with social mobility as well. And I think that the country as a whole has a challenge with social mobility. It's where the government's opportunity area programmes emanated from, but it seems to be particularly acute in some of our rural market towns, and it's something that we have to tackle. And finally, obviously, we're having the UK Food Valley and having such a strong and prominent agricultural sector, which forms quite a lot of our employment base. We have to ensure that that agricultural sector can respond to climate change. A lot of South Holland is at, or maybe even slightly below sea level. And so therefore, we are particularly vulnerable to climate change in our area. And we also need to respond to the revolution in food production and the revolution in technology in the sector. And the National Centre for Food Manufacturing is located in our area. And what we want to do is we want to use that core strength to improve productivity across the entire agricultural sector. So it's a real priority for us. So how did we integrate this within our programme? That was the big question, is how do we take all those diverse set of challenges and also our desire to do something that was bespoke and that met the ask that our communities made of us. We set forward a series of priorities in our prospectus, and we integrated those priorities within our grant assessment criteria. And what that meant on the ground is that projects which address these specific phenomena would be prioritised in terms of funding. So community transport was instantly a big one for us. We funded Wolds community transport, Boston community transport, and a cross-partnership programme led by the Lincolnshire Community and Voluntary Service, which seeks to coordinate all community transport initiatives in the local area. And this is all about making sure that people can reach their doctor's appointment, they can get to their training session. We wanted to focus on regenerating the centre of market towns. Often in large regeneration initiatives, we see that market towns are perhaps slightly overlooked in favour of those big urban regeneration initiatives. And also village centres as well. I mean, we have a lot of large villages that do have a small retail offer that we also wanted to be able to support. Environmental remediation, tackling climate change, priority for us as an area. Rural access to services. Heritage, we have a wonderful heritage in our local area, but also the sustainable retrofit of buildings, because we want to make sure that our buildings are fit for the future, that we're meeting the climate change challenge. We often say, and indeed historic England say it as a mantra, that the best and most carbon efficient building is that which is already in use, which is already built. And again, this is all about realising that social value in terms of environmental change. And finally, again, around those core sector strengths, we wanted to support businesses in the visitor economy and the agriculture sector, but we also wanted to support diversification as well. We do have a very strong VE in agriculture sector, but we wanted to look at digital, we wanted to look at care, we wanted to look at engineering and construction. We wanted to make sure that our area is also growing new sectors and embracing technological change. We've had a particular focus on productivity and exports. Again, it's tackling that entrenched issue of low productivity and exports. Of low levels of productivity. So we designed our grant process manually. And again, at really quite extreme pace to manage the strong influx of applications that we received. Indeed, I remember on my first day, I had 81 outstanding UK SPF applications to process. But from day one, from the outset, we expected all of those applications to tell us how they were going to meet that commitment in terms of environmental sustainability, and also how their organisation would contribute towards positive outcomes for those with protected characteristics, towards that equality, diversity and inclusion agenda, which is so important when you are serving such a vast and diverse array of communities. On skills, on the people and skills strand, because we couldn't mobilise it until this financial year, we had a bit more time and we were able to just think about how we would realise social value through the grant application process in a bit more detail. And so we asked applicants to demonstrate their commitment, so not just to equality, diversity and inclusion, but also social mobility. And we specifically asked the question on rural access to training and skills, because it is something that's really important to our area, and something that, you know, in the larger national programmes is often overlooked. We wanted them to think in depth about reducing the barriers to learning faced by those with protected characteristics. You know, for a lot of adult learners, it's time and cost that are the key barriers, but for those with protected characteristics, it's that, and it may be other issues as well. So, for example, if you have a disability, it's access, physical access in a lot of cases to training, but also, you know, if like me, you're dyspraxic, it's having the resources to undertake that training. You know, it might be a computer to assist with writing, or it might be other aids to enable you to access said training. So we asked providers to demonstrate that. And finally, and this is something that is becoming a trend in national policy, the engagement with and involvement of local South and East Lincolnshire employers by design. So we wanted to make sure that our training offer was fit for our local small businesses. And so this was probably one of the key criteria that we assessed and we awarded grants on the basis of. It featured very strongly in the discussions at the relevant grants panels. So we had quite a comprehensive social value framework in the application process, but Charlie's going to talk a wee bit now about how we integrated that within our assessment of impact, because really impact is where it's at in terms of this investment. We wanted to demonstrate that we have realised value for quite a substantial amount of public funding awarded. So I will without further ado pass you to Charlie.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Saul. So we wanted to cover how we measure social impact within our programme, as Saul's mentioned. And as we highlighted at the beginning, within the South and East Lincolnshire Partnership, we haven't used the social value engine. So there are various metrics within the UK SPF investment plan that contains many quantitative measures that are indicators of social value. And I've mentioned a few of these already on the slide, with some that have created some really great evidence bases. And we'll go through some of those key achievements of the programme on our final slide to showcase, you know, the impact that some of our projects have had on the programme. But in terms of how we measure our outcomes and outputs through our programme, is we measure those through a series of spreadsheets and pivot tables to monitor achievements against our investment plan, contracted and actuals. That gives us a three-way view of what we were contractually agreed to, what our projects are achieving, And then finally, once those projects have contracted, those actual figures that projects are achieving. And these are currently monitored through monthly contract management meetings to understand achievements to date. And whilst also having those monitoring processes, we also sweep up at the end if there is time to kind of capture more data that we have. And I think that's a really great way to showcase projects in the interim, those key kind of achievements that projects are achieving, instead of leaving it all to the end of the project. And it gives us a really good kind of overview in terms of DLUC reporting. But there are challenges that we have had. And this is very heavy administratively on the team, and we've also experienced some challenges surrounding DLUC reporting. So as an example, the data recorded within our investment plan, some of those data were percentage figures, and now DLUC have requested that this is now those raw numerical granular figures. So at the moment, this is posing obviously quite a large challenge in terms of those reporting, and this has been quite substantive for the team, and actually quite a positive as well, because this has meant that we've had to revisit projects, ask for further information on projects, on their outcomes and outputs, to change those values from percentages to those numerical raw granular figures. But also it allows us to open those conversations around, well, what additional outcomes and outputs have been achieved, because actually it's a brilliant exercise to undertake, and it's around adding that impact to the programme to make it more successful. So that's been a really, really great, despite those initial challenges and grumbles that we had, it's actually proven to be a really worthwhile exercise to undertake. And next, we wanted to showcase a project that we have been supporting within our programme and the impact that is having on society. So I wanted to showcase BEAM. So this is around overcoming barriers to employment. And more specifically, this project aims to support households experiencing a risk of homelessness, and supporting them into employment and private sector housing. And this project has enabled BEAM to support them through financial barriers that individuals may have, and prevent those households from starting work or accessing private sector housing. So as an example, this project has had around 40 referrals to the programme, which is a vast amount. And we've had 2 individuals that have gone on to employment and housing. So it's really started to help support those that need that support into that further employment opportunities and housing. And have we got, I think, is that it all for that one? And then this one is the final slide that we wanted to showcase. And as with all grant funded schemes, we wanted to kind of showcase some of the really great the progress in which we have had within our programme. And with this, and as I'm sure some of you may know, that typically with grant schemes there tends to be a bit of a lag between when grants have been awarded, when they are in delivery, and that collection of data. And we are in the midst of the programme and collecting some vital data to make sure that we can ensure that there is an impact on our programme. But with our comprehensive systems in place, and down to the sheer dedication of the team with our various spreadsheets and all the administrative labour of Excel and pivot tables and chasing kind of projects on those outcomes and data. We've had some fantastic results in terms of what we have achieved within our programme, and I think the stats that are on here really speak loud in terms of, you know, we've already supported 235 additional volunteering opportunities within our area, and those 285 additional community arts, cultural and heritage events that are taking place to bring everybody together, to feel inclusive, and, you know, the impact that this programme has had has been significant. Saul, did you want to add anything in there?
No, absolutely. I mean, again, just to reiterate the point, you know, we are still at that very early stage of data collection, but in relation to our investment plan, the way in which we focused on social value and the way in which we have prioritised those metrics around environmental support, around sort of investing in heritage, culture, the arts, and in rural access has really supported us, because if more people can access these events, these volunteering opportunities, it means that the throughput in terms of our UK SPF outcomes is a heck of a lot greater, and therefore as a consequence we are already exceeding our investment plan target in terms of volunteering opportunities, and indeed we are getting there in terms of business assists a year in advance. So I mean, we are seeing the throughput and we are seeing the benefit of using social value in our grant management framework. It's using thoughtful design to pull through into the slightly more how do I put this, the slightly colder focus on quantitative outcomes that we often see from central government, and so we are seeing that this is having great benefit, not just for our programme but also for the people in our local area as well. And just very finally, I can see there are a few questions in the chat, which Maddie, do I come to those now, or is it a case that we come to those at the end?
Well, I first of all, thanks very much for the presentation, but I think we'll leave that till the end, and we'll go to East Riding of Yorkshire Council now, and then, you know, we take them all together.
Well, thank you very much everyone for listening. And if you do want to get in touch to talk about our SPF programme, our contact details are there on the slide. Thank you.
I guess that's over to us then, Andrea. I'll just start sharing my screen.
Brilliant, thanks, Jen. Okay, so I'm Andrea Turton. I'm a local growth programme manager at East Riding of Yorkshire Council, and Jen Jefferson works in the team here as a programme funding coordinator, and both of us actually focus quite heavily on social value here at East Riding Council. And we sit within the regen and funding teams, the regeneration and funding team, and we're also within the local growth team. So I'll explain as we kind of go through the presentation, but we're going to focus for you today particularly on communities and place element of UK shared prosperity, and how we have specifically implemented social value within that. So thank you, Jen. So just a bit of an overview then, and I feel like I need to do a little bit of a marketing speech on East Riding, because Sol did such a brilliant one on Lincolnshire, so I'm going to attempt to do a little bit as well. So actually we're north to Lincolnshire, but we're very similar in terms of our makeup. So we're very rural, and we've got a really magnificent coastal strip across East Riding as well. And I go like this because it kind of goes down the side. So we've got kind of Withensea and Spurn Point right in the kind of southern area of the council, and then kind of going upwards right over the Yorkshire Wolds, which if you go right across, you've got sort of lots of market towns like Pocklington that kind of border on going into York. And then as you kind of go to the south of our county, we kind of kiss should we say, we border onto Hull, and then coming up round to the eastern side we have Goole, which obviously is right by the Humber. So like I said, we're very similar in terms of our sort of demographics, with our rurality and our coastal strips as well. So but just a bit of an overview here. So East Riding was allocated 10.4 million through the UK Share Prosperity Fund to cover the period from April 2022 to March 2025. And then we also had 1.8 million through the Rural England Prosperity Fund, covering April 23 to March 25. And the focus of today is we're focusing on communities in place, because and those are the figures of the breakdown over those years for communities in place element of the UK Share Prosperity Fund and the REPFA Fund, as we call it in an acronym now. But within the local growth team, we were lucky, I think, in a way, or maybe forward thinking, we would say. We were already working very heavily within our towns. So we were very successfully developing town action plans right across our towns across East Riding. So this was really strengthened our ability to identify projects based on need. And that really enabled us to really quickly get into action in April 2022. So mirroring kind of what Sol was saying, obviously the funds came along and we had to really quickly get into action. So this was a really good way of us being able to do it, because we'd already identified some needs across our towns with these very specific town action plans. So that was how we started. If you just go on to the next page for me, Jen. Just to give you a little bit of an idea of the sort of projects that have started to come out of the UK Share Prosperity for us here at East Riding. So here's a sort of plethora of projects that have been awarded in year 1 and year 2. So you'll see that a number of the projects have been awarded to organisations really in the heart of our communities. So they're either parish and town councils, village halls, churches. So what we've been really working really hard is to really get to the heart of our communities and to work with some organisations that may have not done hardly any funding applications before. They're quite small. Some of our town and parish councils, obviously, we've worked with over a number of years, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they were armed and ready to be able to deal with the complexities that UK Share Prosperity bring. So you can see here that a lot of the projects are looking at kind of improving accessibility, promoting biodiversity, improving community safety in order to deliver those outputs and outcomes. But you can also see there that those outcomes lend themselves really well in terms of looking at social impact and the social outcomes that these projects will actually achieve. If you just move along for me, Jen. So just to give you a little bit of a kind of contextual image of how we're administering the UK Share Prosperity Fund. So we have 2 distinct teams here at East Riding Council, all within regeneration and funding. But we have a programmes team that directly manage and administer the funding. They coordinate the grant calls, they manage the grant process, including the assessments, applications, and they providing that kind of technical expertise and support. And a lot of the staff, we're very lucky, but a lot of that staff have some excellent skills that they've worked on in previous European funds, so the ESIF funds. So we're very lucky at East Riding that they have a lot of technical expertise that they can offer into the UK Share Prosperity programme. So sitting alongside that, we have the local growth team, where myself and Jen sit. and we support town and parish councils and community organisations to bring those projects forward and give them some support through that grant process. So within the local growth team, we also have a social value team. So that consists of 3 staff. So that's myself and Jen, who's on the call today, and 1 other member of the team. And we specifically support in the social value evaluation of the UK Shared Prosperity projects, as well as social value right across the council services. So, I mean, we've been directly involved in social value for a decade now, and we're obviously part owners of the social value engine team. So if you just forward that on for me, Jen. So I just wanted to go over a little bit about why we are specifically looking at social value, specifically for the UK Shared Prosperity Fund and other community grants that we've got. So like I said, we've been looking at social value and embedding social value for a decade now, and we are obviously part owners of the social value engine. We don't have to measure social value within UK Shared Prosperity funding. I saw that there was a question on that in the chat, so I'll answer that now. It's not a requirement of the fund, but the reason that we at East Riding have chosen to measure social value is it really helps us to identify those social impacts within those projects that have delivered. It helps us kind of understand better the impact that it's making, but it also helps those small community groups, village halls, churches also understand their true impact, and that helps them be better equipped to apply for other funding applications and funding bids. Because like I said earlier on, some of the groups that we've been working with and supporting haven't necessarily done a lot of funding applications before, so there's been quite a lot of support and help required. But what we've also found, and we'll sort of talk about that a little bit in a little while, is it helps with our conversations with our ward councillors. It really helps them to understand the social value of the projects that we're delivering, and it gives them a much more holistic and well-rounded balance of what we're actually delivering through not just the UK Shared Prosperity programme, but all our projects and programmes. So I'm going to hand you over to Jen now, who's going to talk to you about how we have specifically embedded the social value process, specifically with UK Shared Prosperity Fund, but we'll also touch on another community grant as well.
Thank you, Andrea. So yeah, my role is predominantly to work kind of on the ground with these organisations that have been successful in applying for the funding. As has been mentioned, and I'm sure you've all been through that pain of year 1, get the money out, and kind of the evaluation was a bit of an afterthought. We have learnt some lessons, and as the years have gone on with the funding, we have developed processes now which make evaluation much easier. So for starters, with the year 3 applications, when the funding call was released, we decided to, along with the programmes team, run a series of workshops all across the region for anyone who was interested in submitting an expression of interest to come along. And it was a really joined up approach between the social value team and the programmes team. It was going through all the things that needed to be considered, the outputs and outcomes, which are confusing for us. So I'm sure they're confusing for, you know, the community groups, where a lot of the people applying for funding are not professional bid writers. They're sometimes they're volunteers who really just want to obtain this funding so they can make their village hall better, or whatever it might be. So we worked with the programmes team. We held a series of workshops. Within the workshops, we really tried to have a joined up approach. What we didn't want to show what we didn't want to come across as that social value was an additional task for people to do. We wanted it to be a combined effort. And I think Charlie touched upon this, that a lot of the shared prosperity outcomes, they are quantitative, but we can put a figure on that as well. And we use a social value engine to do that. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. So we just wanted to kind of express that while you're collecting that quantitative data, let's throw a bit of qualitative in there as well. And we know what difference you're making, so let's evidence it, and let's evidence it from the start. So following the workshops, once the applications had come in and had been successful, after the organisations had really received their letter of intent, we then held inception meetings with all the successful applicants. So again, this was an approach that was between the programmes team and the social value team, and this was at more of a granular level of you know, for the contracted outcomes and outputs, but also what social value, what additional outcomes is your project going to deliver. And at this early stage, it helped us identify what we thought that we could deliver, what evidence we already had, so with our baseline data, and how, if we didn't have the baseline data, how we could get that at this early stage. And then going forward, as the project is going through its life cycle, how we can be collecting that data throughout the life cycle of the project, so that when it comes to the end of the project and the reporting, we've got all the data and the information there, and we're not kind of scrambling around for it. Obviously, if there's outcomes that we can't evidence, then we can't include them. So that's a lesson that we've learned quite early on with some of the earlier projects. A lot of outcomes we know that we had achieved, but we couldn't prove it. So going on to the next point, so developing a theory of change. This is, I'll just quickly flick onto the next slide and then I'll come back to this one. So this is our theory of change. This is just an example, and I know it's small, but the slides will be shared at the end, so don't worry too much if you can't see all the text. But we use a theory of change to really help us at an early stage map out what we think our outcomes are going to be, who our beneficiaries are, and it just helps us keep a track of our project along the way. We have completed a theory of change for all of our internal projects, but it is optional for our external organisations. So like I've said, a lot of village halls run by volunteers, they don't want to be sat doing a theory of change, and that's okay, but it's an option there for people to do that, and I'll work with them to complete that at this stage. And it just gets people thinking about their outcomes, and not just their intended outcomes, but also unintended outcomes that may appear because of the project. So I'll just slide back to the next one. So once we've completed our theory of change, we will work together to collect our evidence, or put tools in place to be able to collect our evidence. So surveys, we have an engagement tool that we use called Commonplace, which is really useful. It allows us to put surveys out there, and all of our residents can go onto that online platform and answer our questionnaires. So we found that a really useful tool. Found it a useful tool for collecting baseline data and actual data, because if we feel like we haven't got any baseline data, then we can put a retrospective question in there. You know, how did you feel before this ramp had been put into the village hall, and things like that. So it's a really useful tool. Once we had kind of thought about our outcomes, we use a workbook, so similar to one of the spreadsheets that Charlie has shown, but we use it specifically for social value. And what we do is we forecast our outcomes, and we use a social value engine to measure our social return on investment. So using the quantitative SPF outcomes and our qualitative social value outcomes, I then map them to the financial proxies that are built into the social value engine. So there's a question in the chat there as well. I'll just come to that one about using the social value portal TOMS. We don't use social value portal, we use a social value engine, and within the engine there's over 360 financial proxies, and it lends itself very well to the SPF outcomes. They're very similar, so it was quite easy to match our outcomes to a financial proxy, and we forecasted the social return on investment for a lot of our projects before they started. Following on from that, we have progress meetings with our groups, so it's really useful because everybody is clear on what outcomes they are collecting evidence for. So the progress meetings are not just for social value, it's also for obviously the spend and the contracted kind of SPF. Don't know what word I'm looking for, but you know what I mean. So, and at that point we can kind of run through the social value side of it as well. So how is it going with your data collection? Do you need any more support from us? And it just enables us to kind of tackle any issues at that point. So then when it comes to entering the data into the engine, again, we've already forecasted and we will update them with actuals once completed. As Saul's mentioned, outcomes are not immediate, so we are still in the process of collecting evidence for a lot of our projects. We do have some completed ones, but a lot of them are still ongoing because I'd rather kind of wait a few months and get some real hard evidence and real hard impact than kind of rush through and just put a figure in kind of for the sake of it. And case studies, we also ask our projects to give us a case study, ideally 2 case studies, one for the organisation, one for a member of the organisation, a member of the community who's really benefited from that. So I'll just skip through the next slide because that's the theory of change that we've seen. This is just an impact card that we do for our project. So the social value engine gives us a report, but what we try to do is take the kind of highlights out of the report and put it into an impact card for our organisations to be able to share in a more kind of succinct way. So for this one, Pocklington Festival, for every £1 that was invested, £6.30 had been returned, and it just, like I say, highlights the kind of key points there. And we do this for all of our projects. And this is the second part. So we map our shared prosperity projects to the Bristol Accord. So it just tells you which domains of the Bristol Accord that we've hit. So within the social value engine, you can map against either the Bristol Accord or the Sustainable Development Goals, or both. This is an impact card from one of our community grants called Do It for East Yorkshire. So I'll just hand back over to Andrea to talk through these.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Jen. Yeah, so just to give you a little bit of difference that isn't UK Shared Prosperity specific, we have a community grant called the Do It for East Yorkshire Community Grant that was, we invested as a council into that grant that was then disseminated to community groups. So that started in June 2021. And then each financial year we were looking at the impact of those grants. So this particular impact card you're looking at is a particular part of the fund was specific to bringing forward welcoming place, or warm spaces as some people know them as. So community groups could apply to the grant to have welcome place activities in their communities, and you can see this this was the social value that was created for that particular part of the fund. But what's significant about demonstrating the impact was that when we demonstrated the impact to our ward councillors, they could very easily understand what the social impact it had been of this particular grant. And we have, since 2021, they have invested over £1 million into this fund, because they were able to very easily see. And we have now just opened, we've relaunched the grant for this financial year with 500,000, which is the most that we've had. So I think that what I wanted to highlight here is that by taking a lot of the really granular detail out and displaying it in these impact cards really creates a really good narrative and very easy for people to understand. So if you just whiz forward, yeah, again, so that second slide is the same as the one that Jen showed. And I think what's good about mapping it to the Bristol Accord is it really does give you this kind of sense of how that grant has been impactful across those different domains. So you can see all the different domains there. So how has it influenced social and cultural? How has it influenced our services? Where has it been well served? Where has it supported governance and partnerships? So it gives it a very good narrative. So I'm just going to finally end on some summaries and lessons learned for us. So the top one for us is obviously planning the process from the outset where possible. We know it's not always possible, but when you do, it does make the system and the process a lot easier. Don't assume that organisations know about social value, because they absolutely don't. Some do, some have very little knowledge of it. So, I mean, obviously you heard Jen talk about how we really embedded that conversation about social value with our community groups. And when you look at something like our community grant, you know, we could have a couple of, you know, older people from our communities who have got together, got a small constituted group and running a really active social group, but they're not, you know, their thinking isn't about social value. Their thinking is about offering tea and coffee for the people that come into these social activities. So, but what we have found that through conversation, we're able to talk them through that process, talk them through about why it's important, how then that fits into a bigger picture, and how that helps with decision making in terms of making those funds still available for years to come. So integrating the process into grant management systems where you can. So we've integrated it into our grant management system, which is called FlexiGrant. So every time somebody makes an application, for example, to our community grant, they have to identify the social value within the application form right from the beginning. Bit like Sol was describing that they've done in their area as well. So having those early conversations about social value, what applicants will need to consider, having lots of templates, lots of advice, things that they can easily pick up and do to make it so much easier for them. Agreeing the outcomes and how they will be evidenced right from the beginning. Accessing tools like we've developed our social value workbook. Unintended outcomes may still occur, and this is a good thing. I know this comes up quite a lot where people panic because it hasn't been one of the outcomes that they thought they were going to achieve. It's actually a different one. That's actually a really good thing, and we would welcome that. Regular contact with the projects to make sure that they're doing it, because obviously, as we know, time goes on, they don't necessarily, they might not tell you they don't understand. So just making sure that you get those regular contacts in. Submission of the outcomes and evidence at appropriate intervals. And then, like I said earlier on, offering lots of templates, i.e. survey templates that might be helpful for them. And then lastly, and very importantly, sharing the results with the projects, you know, helping them to see the impact they're having. And the impact cards are a really great way of doing that, because it's very easy for them to see those and use them for future funding possibilities if they want to. And Maddie's just telling me we're out of time, but good news, I have finished. So I'll hand back to you, Maddie.
Yes, first of all, thanks so much, everyone. We did get some really good questions. But with 3 minutes on the clock, I suggest that rather than try and answer these all, why don't we get back to everyone that's joined us today with some answers, with some links, with more information. I think then we can provide more detail, maybe.
Mm-hmm. That's
So
absolutely fine with
please,
me.
by all means, please feel free to ask more questions, and I assure you we will answer them all. One last question then to all the presenters today is, like, if you have, we had a lot of attendees today, or maybe slightly earlier on in the social value journey, might be using other tools than social value engine. Still keen to embed social value more into the grant management processes. What tip would you give them? If you could just say one thing, what would you like to advise? And I'll start with Saul, and then I'll work my way down my screen.
I think it's to be aware of the administrative burden if you are trying to do it manually. I think we've got a successful system in place for quantifying social value, but it has taken a lot of our time, and indeed, well, a lot, I say ours, the Royal We, a lot of Charlie's time to implement that infrastructure and implement it so it's effective. The second tip, and apologies if I'm not allowed to, is to really work in depth for your communities to understand what they understand by social value, and to work with them on the reporting, because it may be the case that Andrew and Jennifer were saying that there may be those unintended outcomes that have been generated, which will reflect back in your UK SPF outcomes over the long term. So 2 tips rather than 1 there, but I think both equally important.
Charlie, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, mine's just engagement is key from both a staff and a beneficiary point of view. Beneficiary, it's that making sure that the communities or individuals understand what it actually means, what does social value mean in terms of that output, those outcomes that we're giving. And then from a staff point, it's that the data collection, what we actually need to do, making sure that that's collated. So engagement in all aspects is important.
And Andrea, I know at the end, your last slide, and I imagine we will share the slides today, won't we? You had a big list.
Yeah,
if you had to summarize that into 5 words.
I would probably just highlight the first one is take the time to plan. Take that time to really sit down and think about what you want to do and how you want to do it before you embark on it, and make sure that it works with what you have. What we're trying to do is not create something different. What we're trying to do is embed it with an existing process or an existing way of working, and I think that's the easiest way of doing it.
Jennifer, do you agree?
I do, and I'll just one last thing, just keep it simple. It doesn't have to be really complicated process. Just keep it simple. You're already collecting data, so like Andrew says, try and fit it into the processes that you're already doing.
Thank you so much to today's speakers. I said this meeting or this webinar is recorded, and we will share the recording afterwards, as well as the slides and answers to your questions. So please keep an eye on your inbox, will either be this afternoon or tomorrow. So for now, thanks everyone, and we hope to see you again at the next session.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.